Welcome to What's America Thinking. I'm Julia Manchester. This week, we're diving into something everyone is complaining about, the soaring cost of food. Average grocery store prices have increased as much as 25% since 2020.
Well, they're definitely higher, and which is sad because a lot of people are struggling.
They're horrible. Like, no reason we should be paying that much for food right now. Absolutely not.
Currently, the grocery prices are exceeding our ability to have a normal living, and I think they're also contributing to having to make other decisions on how we're going to continue feeding ourselves, like having a garden. But of course, not all of us have the ability to have a garden.
Despite reports that inflation is cooling, we're still seeing outrageous prices and hearing terms like greedflation and shrinkflation being thrown around daily. How is it possible that we are still paying more for less? Even President Biden is frustrated his favorite snack is dwindling in size and growing in cost.
And as an ice cream lover, what makes me the most angry is that ice cream cartons have actually shrunk in size, but not in price. I've had enough of what they call shrinkflation. It's a ripoff.
Now, the president is not alone. We heard from people across the country who are not so happy about this little thing called shrinkflation.
The cereal boxes are smaller and they cost, seems like, twice as much, but you're getting less. So it just feels like I'm being robbed. And I don't like being robbed.
Chips, really, what I was noticed more, just really smaller bags.
Everything's much smaller. When you go like get a steak, right? It's like maybe like a 1 ounce. So yeah, everything's much smaller.
Until now, the White House has been criticized for sky-high food prices, but the blame game seems to be shifting from the commander-in-chief to what some Americans say are greedy corporations. According to a new Navigator Research poll, 59% of Americans think corporate greed is the major cause of elevated sticker prices. We hear a lot about the high prices of meats and eggs, but according to the USDA, the top 3 highest prices increase in 2023 were of fats and oils, sugars and sweets, and cereal and bakery products. Here to break down what's really going on here is NewsNation business contributor Gary B. Smith. Gary, thank you so much for being here and taking the time. This is certainly a topic I get asked about all the time, but I have so many questions myself.
Sure. My pleasure, Julia.
So to start off with, we keep hearing this term greedflation. Just break down what that actually means.
Okay. Well, one, this is a term 99% of the time used by politicians. 2, it is basically saying that corporations are charging above and beyond what they should charge consumers for the products they sell. Since we're talking about grocery items, it'd be instead of charging $4 for a box of checks, they charge $4.25 for a box of checks.
Right. So, we've heard the argument that greedflation or, these changes that these corporations are making could lead to innovation and changes in the market. How does that happen exactly?
Yeah, exactly. For people that complain about greedflation, if you will, they don't understand economics. I'm sorry. That sounds, for everyone complaining about high food prices, and I'm one of them. I don't like paying more money for high food prices. But in order for companies to innovate, they need profits. In order to attract competitors, they need to see that they can make a large amount of money. For example, let's just say Coke was the only one out there and they could charge $10 a bottle for Coke.
Right.
Someone's going to scratch their head and say, wait a second, if I am RC Cola, to use one from the past, and I can charge $9 a bottle for similar tasting soda, I'm going to enter that market. They do. And then what happens? Coke has to reduce their prices. Other competitors are attracted. That's why we have so many choices in the supermarket to begin with.
Right. So we talked about greedflation. What about shrinkflation? Break down what that means.
I think shrinkflation is a little bit more insidious, if you will, because what companies do is they take the same package, if you will, and they either put less in it or they shrink the package and charge the same. So people walking up and say, I'm still getting my same box of cereal, and I'm still paying, whatever it is, $4.50. And they think, okay, well, that hasn't changed. But when they look closely and they say, oh, wait a second, I'm getting a half ounce less in my box, really they're paying more.
So to be clear, we're not imagining this, because it seems like a bag of chips these days is like, what, 50% air, 50% if that chips?
I'm not sure it's 50%, but yes, along those lines, the staples that you get can often, I won't say always, can often be more filled with air, if you will.
So which products are the biggest culprits when it comes to shrinkflation?
Well, it's normally the products that people don't pay a lot of attention to, and that are staples: toilet paper, snacks, cereal, candy, things like that. People just scoop off the shelf. People are always going to scrutinize what a pound of veal is going to be, or 2 pounds of chuck roast. But they're going to say, look, my kids like Cheerios. I'm going to get the Cheerios regardless. I'm going to get the toilet paper. I always bought Charmin. I'm going to get it. I throw it into the cart, and then all of a sudden you say, wait a second, it's either not going as far or I'm paying more per ounce, if you will.
So turning to the public policy portion of this, Washington says they're going to put a stop to corporate greed, but can they actually even do that?
I hope not. I mean, this has been tried. I don't want to date either of us, but I remember when Nixon had the whip inflation now. We had price control, or maybe it was Ford had whip inflation now. Nixon had price controls. These things never work. It's going against the fabric of capitalism. You want choices. You want more choices. You want eventual lower prices. You have to have competition in there. It's trying to limit what companies can make is a terrible idea.
Right. So it's easy to tell when you're not getting a dozen eggs, but what tricks are being used to dupe people into not noticing the smaller size with other food products?
Well, they keep the same size and they package less in there. Stuff like toilet paper actually has less sheets. A yogurt cup have the same size but has less ounces in there. So all the normal tricks that if you were given a half day to think of, you'd come up with, that's what these supermarket sellers are doing.
So it seems like these supermarket sellers are sort of, appearing to skirt the corners, cut corners, if you will, with trying to make products smaller. But how can consumers fight back and essentially get more bang for their buck at the grocery store?
Well, I like to think I'm ground zero for that, because I do weekly shopping, sometimes multiple times a week with my wife, and we've done a few things. One, don't be afraid to switch supermarkets. Look, in our area in Florida, Publix is the biggie, but you know what? Winn-Dixie is cheaper and for the same quality. Two, take advantage if the supermarket has loyalty programs. Winn-Dixie has one. Over time, that adds up. So every few weeks, you find, wow, I have $100 worth of free groceries because I'm a loyalty member. Three, if you see items that you like on sale, for example, President Biden likes ice cream. Winn-Dixie has a very good premium brand ice cream, but if it's BOGO, pick up more ice cream than you normally would and put it in the freezer. Another way to save. Fourth, and this is probably the most important, scrutinize the labels in the supermarket. They always give cost per ounce. So you can compare and contrast just about everything in there and say, oh, wait a second, this looks like it's cheaper, but I'm actually paying more per ounce. If you're a smart shopper, I'm telling you, week in, week out, you can save $25, $50, even $100.
Just to wrap this up, when can we expect prices to go back to normal, or are we living in the new normal when it comes to smaller packages and higher prices?
Well, it's funny, Julie. I always think of what is normal? Is normal? We're supposed to go back to 50 cents a gallon gasoline, or supposed to go back to $1 for a box of cereal? Everyone's normal is different. I guess what we're really asking is, when can we say, oh, I guess prices are reasonable? I guess when they come down to what they were, considering inflation, and that'll probably going to take about a year or two before they're back down to rising as inflation would. For example, what do people consider normal now with gasoline is $3 a gallon normal for gasoline? I guess it depends on, where you've been and where you think we're going. But I would say all that, mumbo jumbo in there, probably a year or so.
Yeah, what is normal? Gosh, we could do an entire episode of this show on what is normal. We live in very interesting times. But Gary B. Smith, thank you so much for breaking it down with us today.
My pleasure, Julia. Thank you.